Hi everybody, I don't see anything. I guess you can see me well with all the lights on me right now. Welcome to the keynote of FMX 2023. We have in the room a person who will be telling us what sustainability and the environment means within media and entertainment production. His name is McKenna. He is the CEO and co-founder of Final Pixel, and he will tell us about his findings about sustainability with virtual production. Please welcome Michael McKenna.
Thank you. Thank you, Mario, and thank you to FMX for having me here. It's really a pleasure to be up here today and share some of this information I've got about virtual production and sustainability. Let me start by telling you a little bit about what to expect. I've got an introduction to Final Pixel. We're going to talk a bit about virtual production. That's mainly to ensure that we're all on the same level of understanding of what I'm talking about when I say virtual production. We're then going to get into sustainability and virtual production and begin to explore some of the emerging findings from our VP Green group. I'll tell you a lot more about VP Green in due course. So I'm Michael McKenna. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Final Pixel. Final Pixel is a global creative studio. We specialize in virtual production, and we have bases in London, New York, LA. We operate from concept to final pixel, which means that we like to get involved very early on in the process. We have our own virtual art department that builds the content that we place on the LED walls, and we have production teams in multiple different countries. Some of our clients are Warner Brothers, Discovery, BBC. We work very closely with WPP. We launched the Formula One car for Oracle Red Bull this year. So we're operating with a very wide range of different individuals and clients that are using virtual production now. One of our partners, we have a formal partnership with Hogarth. Hogarth is a WPP-owned advertising agency. And as you can see, this has really spread out our footprint internationally and has given us more and more interest in work in the world of virtual production and given us the opportunity to apply virtual production techniques to many different types of production. A couple of years ago, we also launched an academy. Very quickly, we learned that there was very few people that knew how to do virtual production, and so we knew we had to train them up. So we've been working hard at training at all different levels, from crew to corporation to students, new graduates, all sorts of different courses that are available online and in person. We're an authorised training partner with Unreal Engine and Epic Games, so we're really trying to move things forward and educate everyone around the benefits of virtual production and actually how to do the jobs and the new roles that have emerged. So that's a bit about Final Pixel, just so you understand where we're coming from. Here's a quote. Those who disrupt their industries change consumer behaviour, alter economics, and transform lives. And I really feel at the moment we're going through a major change in content production. And I'll tell you more about that in a moment. First of all, what is virtual production? Now, some of you may have sat through the previous presentation, which really got deep in the detail of how virtual production has been applied at the very kind of high-end level. But very fundamentally, it comes down to three technologies that have come of age. One is the video game engine. We use Unreal Engine. Other engines are available. We find that has provided us with this platform to project our images onto 3D wall, in 3D onto the LED wall. We have camera tracking. Camera tracking has been around for a long time, certainly at least about 20 years. So this is not a new technology, but it's been refined and is improved, and the accuracy gets better and better every year. And then the third technology is LED walls. LEDs have really improved in resolution over the last few years. A lot of these have came from the kind of live events and touring world. And the pixel pitch on LED is becoming so fine that it's now suitable for film and camera. So these three technologies come together gives us this effect when it, on the LED wall, which is the parallax effect. Now, parallax is this way. It's a way of your mind seeing an environment, and it sort of tricks your mind into thinking that you're in a 3D world. When you see objects move slowly in the far distance versus objects close to you moving a lot faster, it's that effect that tells your brain you're in a 3D environment. And really, when we're doing virtual production, that's a big part of the whole sale of this technology, is that we create environments that have parallax, or we create scenes and virtual sets that have this parallax effect to really make it feel like our actors are there. Here's an example of what that looks like, very, very basically. You can see the pillars here in the foreground move a lot faster than the pillars in the background. And it's this effect as the field of view of the camera sweeps across, gives us this 3D impression of the environment we're in. Here's another example, if it will play. No, it's not playing. We've played a game in some of our classes about where do we think the line is between the wall and the real world, and I don't know if anyone can guess. It's right there. So, we're able to extend that set significantly into the background and create this 3D world. This is what we think of when we talk about virtual production. Now, there is green screen virtual production as another tool. There's full, virtual production, as it were, where you create a whole animation in Unreal Engine. But typically what we're always talking about here is this LED wall virtual production, where you're combining physical sets with the virtual backgrounds. So I believe that we are living through the greatest disruption to content making possibly ever. And that is coming through, looking at history and looking at some of the kind of technology disruption that we've seen in the past. What we do know is that technology disrupts. I'd hazard that, many of you don't see these items around very often anymore. We know that the VHS is gone, floppy disk is barely used, the Walkman's gone, the telephone's gone, in that respect. But what else is it about technology? Technology disruption is also changing how people buy, and it is creating new business models and new companies as a result. And if you look at all those examples again, you can quite quickly see, now we have Netflix and streaming rather than videos. Everything's in the cloud. Spotify taking over Apple iPhone instead of your typical dial-up. So what does this disruption mean for media? Film to digital was probably the biggest tech disruption that we've seen in filmmaking, right? That was what I think we all felt when film camera sales plummeted and everything has now moved to digital. Now that was a major change, but perhaps it was just actually the beginning. Where are we right now? There's market pressure on content production. So we see it every day, higher expectations, higher volumes of production. We see inflation. At the same time, we're having pressures on budgets. People want more for less. But also, right now, we're seeing this explosion of technology. We're seeing photoreal, real-time game engines. We're seeing the control software to drive virtual production stages evolving. We've got real-time motion capture, LED display technology coming of age, remote workflows, hybrid and remote workflows that pre-pandemic would have believed would exist are now becoming commonplace. Artificial intelligence, graphics processing power, augmented reality, all of these technologies are impacting how we think about how we make content production. And I think the combination of these factors is really driving a significant change in what we call at the moment, virtual production is a byproduct, an element of that change. But there are barriers, people talk a lot about how virtual production can be quite hard, it's very complicated, you need a lot of talent in order to do it. It's maybe not photoreal enough, sometimes you can't get the camera to move fast enough, maybe it's too expensive, it doesn't save money, there are barriers, but I think, many of the people in this room will be familiar with the next graph, which I think sums up why these barriers will change over time and probably disappear, is that with Moore's law and what we can fairly safely say is that the improvement in graphics processing is only going to go in one direction, which is only going to help overcome a lot of these barriers. So my belief is virtual production is a method. It's a way of filmmaking. It's like a third way. It's more than just a tool. It's actually bringing us a whole different way of actually doing production. It's something which is, giving us new tools and pre-production, as it were, that we've never had before and that creatives never had before. And a lot of that is driven by real time. I'm going to play a reel so you can see a few examples of what we've been doing. Do we have audio? Can we have audio?
Verstappen, you are world champion.
I tried to put together a list of all the job roles which I think have been affected by virtual production. I put this together in about 20 seconds. It was just off the top of my head, the amount of people that I've seen on set and in productions whose job has been changed by this form of production. And that's why I believe it's more than just IP, it's more than just a tool, it's more than just a pipeline that a VFX company has built. It's actually a fundamental change in how we do things. So this is our end-to-end virtual production process. This is what we do at FingerPixel. And many of you will be familiar with when people talk about virtual production, they say we move more from post into pre. And that's very true. Like this design and build phase that comes after the creative conception is typically a much longer and more in-depth phase than you would normally have. We have pre-vis, production, post. It's different. It's different in the sense that we have more happening in pre, but overall, it doesn't look that different to what a normal production process does. So how does this all relate to sustainability? So what I'm trying to say here is that there's a disruption that's been brought about by virtual production, and it's changing people's roles. And rather interestingly, it's now brought the topic of sustainability to the fore, because people are looking at virtual production and saying, well, actually, perhaps filming in a stage is more green than traveling to film on location. And it's, there's been a lot of discussion about this over the last year or two, that is virtual production more sustainable? Is it actually more green to film in this way in an LED volume with all the power of an LED volume, etc.? And so it's igniting a new conversation on sustainability. And I think for us in this room and for us in this industry, this is a very important discussion to have anyway. And for me, it's just really great that virtual production has ignited that and has allowed us to start talking about it. And this year at FMX, the whole topic of evolving being a key theme of the production of the whole event, I think is really telling, and actually is really why it's really important to start asking these questions. So what are some of the problems? Emissions. There's a couple of different numbers that are from studies. I'm not sure if you're familiar with these, but apparently a large production could release over 2,800 tons of carbon dioxide, which apparently is as much as 11 round-trip journeys to the moon, which is a lot. And another study says that 1 hour of produced TV content releases 2,844 tons of CO2. So we're talking about a fairly large amount of CO2 entered into the atmosphere as a result of our production activities. And this is, before virtual production, trying to take a typical production, which again, we know is always quite difficult to do, but we've got to start somewhere. Emissions, clearly CO2 emissions being one of the major problems. And then damage. Damage is another one with production. We go on location shoot and we bring the whole circus, and I have heard stories about how that's impacted land and particularly wildlife, and I know of some large productions that had some issues with that in certain countries, and I think that what we're seeing here is a bit of a rethink on should we be doing that sort of thing anymore, or should we be doing it in the same way. There's also the kind of ongoing loss of habitat and expansion, which is also impacting those, nature and wildlife. So how might virtual production help? So you've seen the reel, you've seen the LED wall, you can get an idea of what this is. If we can create photoreal virtual environments and place our actors in them on a stage, yes, we could reduce travel. We could also reduce the shooting days. We can shoot multiple locations in one day. We can reduce the amount of set builds. You saw the image there of the foreground set, and there was a very small foreground set. We could extend the rest of it into the background and pull off something fairly convincing, and that's only getting better. We can reduce post-production. As I've said, we move a lot into pre, and we do it in real time, so we're not using so many render farms. We can improve overall productivity, not just multiple locations, but also across the whole period of a shoot. I've got some examples of that. There's also this long-term sustainability dividend that I tried to call it. What I mean by that is if you've got a series and you've just completed the first series, and rather than filming on location, you've created virtual environments instead, you've then got those virtual environments in your back pocket for series 2. So when series 2 comes along, not only do you not need to rebuild those environments, you don't need to go to location as well. Then that just keeps paying every time you do another series. We have more tools. We can choose what energy we use by choosing where we locate our stage. So there's green energy out there. There's a whole raft of information about the different forms of energy that go into that each country has, and being able to place your stage in a country or a location or a studio which uses different forms of energy gives you an extra choice that you don't have when you go on location. You're in a controlled environment, so again, you've got a much greater control over the weather and everything, which may again impact the time of your production. We have more automation, and then remote workflows. Remote workflows is something that as a company we've developed significantly over the past couple of years. We've had to, our teams are remote. We've had to do that through the pandemic. And as a result, we're bringing, not just the sustainability side of that by not having large office spaces, but also making technology more accessible in ways that it hasn't been previously. But does it help? That's the question. Does it do all of these things? I'll give you a few case studies, and then I'll come on to talk a bit more about VP Green. So this year, in February, we launched the RB19 Formula One car. This was the launch of the car that took place in New York for Red Bull Racing. We produced a promo piece that was all shot in virtual production. Now the car itself, obviously it was embargoed product. People couldn't see it until the actual day of the day of the reveal. So we took the car into a studio and shot it in virtual production. Here's the spot. So if you watch this, and I'll explain some more after.
Initiate car drop, Manhattan, Nevada.
Max, they've dropped the car off in the wrong Manhattan. I need a car in New York in 36 hours.
You got it, boss. Can't wait to race the streets.
It's going to be even better when there's no traffic ahead of you. Max, get to Austin and hand over the checker.
Hell yeah.
Thanks for Stafford. You are world champion. We are world champion. Thanks, amigo. Checo, we need you at the launch.
And they revealed the car after that. So they lifted the big LED wall and the car was there, fireworks went off, that kind of thing. So, but what this was a really great example of is how you can take a car on a road trip without actually leaving the studio. We took this, LED volume with location footage, drone footage, stock footage, Unreal Engine environments. And then we also created renders straight out of Unreal Engine. So these were VFX shots that were completely out of Unreal. And we used traditional VFX 3D animation. So we had some of the shots there of the 3D model of the car going through over the Hoover Dam, and some of these other shots on the track were all done with traditional 3D VFX. So this is like a new formula for approaching production. We had this this nose cone shot, for example. That was a straight render out of Unreal Engine. And I think that when we show that piece, or when you look at it, like the very first thought is probably that's a real practical car. And I think what we're seeing here is the photorealism getting better and better to allow us to make decisions in the production that we probably never would otherwise. This shot in particular, it was a request by the client, and we could shoot it on the stage, but actually in the end it would be a lot quicker to render it out of Unreal. That's not typically been the process with our traditional VFX method. It's not traditionally been able to do make decisions and creative decisions like that as quickly and as confidently, given the way that real-time technology is developing. This is a shot of the type of volume we might use for car shoots as well. So the more that we can do volume work that involves cars rather than doing road trips or taking cars out on location, is also clearly going to bring more of a sustainability benefit. But that's just one example. Let me show you a couple of others. When we talk about production, we talk about live action VFX. I think that where we're at now is this new technology-enabled business model where we're combining VFX and live action, and that's what virtual production gives us. It allows us to shoot in multiple locations. So this was 4 locations in one day piece that I've got a reel for here. If you watch this.
They don't play by the rules.
I know, right?
So that was 4 locations. As I say, I'll go back to that slide. 4 locations. We shot just, I think it was about a day and a half overall, including some green screen shots. Now, practically speaking, if you were to do 4 different locations on a traditional shoot, you would have 3, 4 company moves. We're removing all of that by doing it all in a studio. That has an impact on travel. Travel and the CO2 emissions related to travel are probably the largest single contributor to the emissions of production. And so the more that we can reduce travel, the more you're looking at something which is potentially more sustainable. Let's go for that. So, now looking more at post-production, here's a case study from last year where we produced again, this was an advertising piece for Australia Wool. They wanted to create this fire scene in particular, and this fire scene that we shot in the volume was done in a way which obviously saved us having to go out into the Australian outback or somewhere to set a practical fire, and we were able to do it all in VFX in real time. Let me show you the spot and you can have a look.
What does it take to climb the new heights? To face into danger? To comfort what's most precious? What does it take? It takes an Aussie wool grower to make the best wool in the world.
And so this real-time visual effects, as I say, gives is a new like development, and it was mentioned in some other talks today that you're creating the sort of canvas or the virtual environment, but you're also now able to employ animation and other techniques in there to really bring those virtual environments to life. And I think that's the evolution of virtual production now. It's moving away from something that you try and keep really out of focus in the background. We want to make, the virtual production environment part of the scene. It's not all about that. And that's a big reason, behind, our mission. And Final Pixel is all about trying to capture that in camera on the day without having to do a lot of post and VFX work as well. And this was a good example. We created fire in Unreal Engine using Niagara, and we're able to shape and create that in a way that provided a pretty realistic looking fire on set in an LED volume in Melbourne. So again, from a sustainability point of view, we didn't have to set a fire, that's good. But also in this spot, we shot another piece, the interior of the New York apartment on the same day. So we could do 2 locations in one day. Again, saving the company move, saving the travel and expenses. Here's another. This is a documentary that we done for the BBC last year. It was, the challenge here was we had to create 4 different environments spanning 4 different eras, and it was to show Covent Garden basically across these different eras. We started with the concept art, team done these designs, and we then moved into previs, and here's an example of what the environment looked like. Now, these are supposed to be stylized, they weren't supposed to be photoreal, but they were all created in Unreal, they're all real time, and we were able to put these up on the wall and relight them in real time. It gave us a lot of flexibility, much like you would want in a documentary. Here's another example of that. So as we showed Covent Garden through the ages, we were creating a documentary which was able to interact, and have the presenter interact with the environments in a more immersive way. Now, what does that mean, again, for sustainability? Well, one thing, this was all real time. There was no rendering required, so the only rendering that was happening was on the stage. So provided we're tracking our energy usage on the stage and of our artists in pre-production, then we know we're capturing all of the costs, as it were, the emissions and the impact on the environment of that production. And this sort of virtual art process is only going to improve. It won't take long until you'll be able to relight photoreal environments on the fly for documentaries. And what we're seeing now, in addition to that, is artificial intelligence giving even faster, newer ways of creating content. So we had a beta test of a tool called Kubrick earlier this year, and we were able to create AI-driven 2.5D worlds. Essentially, immediately, like it was within a few seconds. You could input your prompt, and it creates the initial image. And then as it works through the Unreal Engine plugin, it would slice that image into parts and create a 2.5D image. And if you remember what I said earlier about parallax, what we're trying to do is create that parallax with 2.5D. And what this does is a quick shortcut to getting you to that world. I don't think it's quite production ready yet, but again, the indications are we can reduce the time, on some locations, some of these virtual builds. Where does that lead us in terms of virtual production sustainability. Again, you can only guess if it's going to reduce time in the process. It's not going to be suitable for everything, but it may help save on some time and location shoots. The other, deployment of virtual production is also in broadcast and live. Now we ran the on-set virtual production for a showcase for SMPTE in the UK earlier this year. Here's a shot that was taken. It was with a whole raft of great partners. We had Framestore, Anna Valley, there was Moses, and we had a whole group of UK partners that came together to make this for SMPTE. And the result, was this. This was a still from the final piece. And I think for most of us looking at that, and if you watch the final piece, it's online somewhere under the SMPTE YouTube. It's a fairly convincing sell that okay, they're in a forest. We're in a forest environment. So what would the alternatives be for that, before virtual production? Well, we could do it in green screen, we could, or go on location. Now, if we'd done it on green screen, would we have got the same kind of lighting from this? I don't know, would it have been different? Would it have passed in the same way? I mean, I think this looks really great and very convincing. But we were able to put it together with, essentially a couple of fake trees in the background. So in terms of your set build, or in terms of your impact on that environment, if we were to actually go to a forest and try and film this, we're doing something which is significantly different here. There's another example of a project that we had where the client wanted us to shoot in multiple different locations. Some of these locations didn't actually exist, they had to be created. But again, this was taking the same approach that it was, let's create a location, let's film in it, and that means that we don't need to travel there. So let's see this.
Just remember where we're going, and remember where we've been, and the world will dance around us. They wanna know what we've got.
So through some of those examples, I think what I'm trying to show is the indicators are there, right? It seems obvious virtual production could be a more sustainable option. But the reality is we're experts in virtual production. We're not sustainability experts. I'm not going to pretend I'm a sustainability expert for sure. Like I have assembled a team that's great at doing virtual production. The sustainability side, we can't answer that question. We don't have the expertise or the knowledge to say, yeah, this is definitely more sustainable. However, it's something that I'm very passionate about and interested in, as are many of our team. So about 2 years ago, we helped support the creation of an organisation called VP Green. Now, VP Green was born out of a university. It was born out of an idea to create some data around the sustainability of virtual production. And this is 2021 when there was still very few virtual productions out yet, but a lot of people were talking about it. A lot of people were saying, yeah, virtual production is more sustainable. You should go and shoot this way. But for us, Final Pixel, we feel we have to be more responsible than that and actually say, well, let's try and actually get the data together so that we can back that up. So we helped support the start of this group. And pleased to say it just had its second annual symposium earlier this year, just in March. We were at Breda in the Netherlands, hosted by Breda University, who also have a really strong interest in virtual production. They have their own LED wall there now. They have courses where they're teaching virtual production, and they're really streaking ahead. For those of you that don't know Breda, it's also really well known in games and game development. So it's got a great pool of talent and great-minded people that can sort of apply themselves to virtual production. So we were happy to be hosted there, and what that symposium Well, actually, you could watch it yourself. You could go into the Breda University School website and you will see some of the discussions that were had there. But fundamentally, it was about bringing together sponsors and partners to discuss and share data around the sustainability of virtual production. These are just some of those that were involved. There's more, and really, what we're trying to do with this group is collect the data. Talk about it, analyze it, challenge each other. Say where the gaps are. Say what else can we do as a collective to get more data about the sustainability of virtual production. Now, what's really interesting, and this is the first time we've really talked about this publicly, is that we're from a lot of the studies that this group is sharing, and from some of the studies which have came out in the press that we've seen separately just over the last 12 months. There is a general trend that we're seeing a 68% to 95% reduction in CO2 emissions by using virtual production over a typical location shoot. I mean, 95%, I couldn't believe that when I first seen it. But we've seen it repeated the same number a few times now. It's always challenging to get like-for-like comparisons, and I don't for any moment think that these are the full picture, and I think there's probably more to do. But even if it's anywhere close to that, that's a very significant statement to be saying about film production. Some of the various studies that have sort of gone into this are up there. So Sony published a study earlier this year. They'd done a location shoot versus a VP shoot. They estimated around 72 to 77% reduction in emissions. There was the Sprout versus Awakening that some of you might be familiar with here that identified a 68% reduction. We know of a global fast-moving consumer goods brand that's identified a 75% reduction across a lot of their shoots. We know also of a broadcaster and TV production, they're seeing over a 95%. We also know of car manufacturer, seeing 85 to 90% reduction. AMV BBDO put out a piece recently that said there was a 95% reduction in the Bupa advert that they made. Icon Virtual produced a study as well recently that they were suggesting there's over a 95% reduction. And then at the bottom there, I've just included this to mention it because it might be in people's heads in this room is, how does offline rendering, as it were, compare with VP and actually using real time versus using render farms. There was a case study out there that was done last year and it was suggesting around about 68% reduction in emissions between the two. I realise I've just thrown a lot of numbers at you, but hopefully you're seeing that there is a trend here. It's still early days. We don't have all the data. This is only just coming together, but the indication is, look, this looks like a more sustainable form of film production. Just as an example, because I do find a lot of the sustainability work out there likes to give examples, as USA film and TV production is estimated at 15 million tons of carbon. If virtual production could reduce those emissions by at least 75%, like we've just seen, and you could move, say, 10% of all your production to VP, that could be over 1 million tons of CO2. Or 2.3 million barrels of oil, 126,000 households, or apparently the entire carbon footprint of Netflix. However, all of these numbers, everything, it's very hard to measure, very hard to find any form of, standard at the moment. And one of the really interesting things about the nature of this area is that different countries have different energy profiles, energy consumption profiles. So you might do, a shoot in Poland compared to a shoot in Sweden might have a very different overall energy profile based on how the energy is actually generated in those countries. So again, all of this is sort of pointing in a certain direction, but it's very, very difficult to get exact answers or results without sort of funded research that's going to look into it in more detail. So it's early days, and I think there's still a fair bit to be done. So I'm going to start drawing this to a close, and I'm going to leave a bit of time at the end for questions, because hopefully maybe there's a couple of questions out there. Have a think. Going back to that quote, those who, about disruption, those who disrupt their industries change consumer behaviour, alter economics, and transform lives. I think perhaps the consumer behaviour, then the economics is covered in how we're looking at how virtual production is changing business models. Perhaps the transformed lives might come from how it can actually make film and TV more sustainable. And then maybe virtual production isn't actually the right term for this. I think about how to try and explain the way that Unreal Engine and real-time tools are changing how we make decisions in the filmmaking process. I take that end-to-end process and weave Unreal Engine all the way through it. We're using it in the creative phase, we're using it in the design and build. In the previs, and it's been used there for a long time. You use it in production now. We're using it on set and live action production, and then obviously, it can come into post and VFX. As I've shown, we're using it for VFX renders. Maybe what we're seeing here, virtual production is the start, and we call this thing virtual production right now, but actually, it's really about real time and how real time is changing the way that we do things. And there's the final thing: adapt or die. Okay, thank you. So if anyone's got any questions, I think if you can put your hand up and somebody will come with a microphone. Thanks. I can't actually see that. Could we put the lights up? Is that okay?
Hi, first, thank you for the talk. My question would be, do you have any more concrete numbers, especially on comparing normal productions with virtual production concerning production costs and production schedules and the other sustainability terms that are not green production?
So, yeah, I think each of those studies, so, one of the best ones to look at, for example, is the Sony study. I think that goes into quite a bit of depth around the sort of numbers involved in terms of emissions. So there is more hard data out there than what I'm showing in this presentation, but I was trying to give a summary. But yeah, absolutely, there is more out there. I would say, though, it's really challenging to get like-for-like comparisons. It's, you have to try and find a very suitable production in order to do that. I think one of the discussions we've been having with broadcaster is whether we could take a long-running drama, something like a long-running series that is quite predictable over a long period of time, and look at the emissions of that over a period of time, and then look at how that might change if you're to do it in virtual production, and then that kind of gives us a sort of larger data set to work from. But it is really challenging to find that, and I think the answer is going to come from more funded research that actually specifically tries to pick out a really good use case and then apply all the sort of sustainability thinking to that. So yeah, I think that for me though, again, one of the big things with all this is just raising the awareness and making people think about the sustainability of their production. It's still such a evolving new thing for many film and TV productions to be incorporating, say, a green steward on set. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's like having somebody on set who's almost looking after the sustainability of how everyone is operating on a film set. There's the calculators, employing these calculators and gathering the data through calculators is again something that is becoming more and more common, and I think the BBC now mandate the use of Albert on a lot of their productions. So yeah, the data's building, and we are getting more of it, but it's just very, as far as I can see and what people are telling me, is very inconsistent across different countries, so making comparisons can be challenging. Thanks. Any other?
Well, you talked about how you can save energy with real-time rendering, and I guess with the LED volume compared to doing it in post. But how does the LED volume fit in there? Because I can imagine it uses a lot of energy as well.
It does, yeah, and all of those numbers included the use of energy on the LED volume. So it uses energy, and that's why it's not completely offset by doing virtual production. But when you look at there's a breakdown of what the typical carbon emissions are on a TV film set. I think it's something like 50% or something like that is travel, you know. So as soon as you reduce that, you can reduce that amount of travel. That's what makes the biggest impact. And yeah, I think the LED maybe starts to offset a little bit some of the benefit you get there. But you know, there's ways of then managing that. You know, LED. When you travel, you can't choose where the energy comes from that fuels your travel. Whereas when you're in a studio, you can choose to film in a studio that has green energy and that is actually either fully creating their energy themselves or is using it from a green energy source. So it introduces a new, you know, extra variable there that you didn't have previously. We also have then, you know, when you're talking about the rendering, you're working. It depends on the LED wall, but you know, you can work on a virtual production shoot with a 20-meter wide wall, and you maybe only use 3 or 4 render nodes for that. So it's not a massive render farm, and again, you're using the rendering. You're using the energy that is powered by that studio. So you've got again control and choice over where your energy is coming from. You know, sort of tactically. So yeah, I think because of there's one other thing as well. Actually, there are companies, you know, I know that ARRI and in London, they have been developing like control mechanisms for the LED wall so that it dims when it's not being used or that sort of thing, or like trying to create real-time automation so that you're actually able to manage the use of that asset as well more. So I think, you know, as these things all develop and as we try and do that, that will also naturally kind of lean itself to reducing the overall kind of impact. The big question about, you know, LED though, which, you know, I'm still not convinced on or seen all the sort of the answers to yet, is the whole supply chain, you know, side of LED and like, you know, what impact does that have and you know, where could that be better? And I think that will be eventually the sort of next phase of understanding the sort of green around virtual production, is that, you know, how does the manufacturing supply chain also support it, or does it? But again, you know, you can only measure so much, and you're going to try and take it a step at a time. Any other questions? If not, then up one there.
So I was wondering, is there a chance of more of a time crunch or a workload increase happening for the artists working on the environments, with the possible production also increasing due to the more efficient technologies?
Yes, I think there really is, and it needs managed like very carefully on shoots. I think that because you're now all working to a shoot date, that you know, everyone's always working to a deadline. But I think that with virtual production, there's often so many unknowns. You know, there's a lot of testing to do before you actually get to the stage. It means that there's quite likely to be some rework of environments to get them all optimized, to get them working well before you get on set. So I think, yeah, it does bring you know, more sort of periods of intense, you know, activity as you get to that. Whether that's more or less than, you know, doing a large feature, you know, in existing pipelines, I don't know. I couldn't really say. But what we do see though is that there's a finite deadline that we know we have to hit, because the shoot dates are usually very fixed, you know, a lot of the time, and so therefore, yeah, you've got a window. You're also reliant on the availability of a lot of other creatives, and that's also a factor in trying to, you know, refine and get things looking right before you get on the stage. So changing the mindset around how you approach production is a big part of it, and how directors in particular might approach production. It can often be quite challenging to bring on a director who's not previously shot in virtual production to then, you know, ask them to think about things they wouldn't normally think about at this stage, you know, particularly if they're used to using green screen. So I think that's all part of the challenge, but once, you know, those creatives and individuals do start engaging in virtual production, you know, I would say the vast majority have enjoyed it so much and you know, really can see the benefit that next time around they do become more engaged at the right times, and they do try and, you know, make it a smoother process. So yeah, I mean, virtual production for me is still in a like very early beta phase in some ways, you know, like it's developing, but you know, it's clearly there at, you know, Marvel, you know, level. We see ILM doing, you know, Ant-Man, for example, earlier today. But you know, like we're broadening this out to the whole of the industry, and so that's going to take a lot more change in education. So yeah, I do think it could introduce a bit more of a sort of tricky period. But the other way of looking at this approach is that as an artist, and particularly what we do with our artists, is you're often given an environment. You're not given just a single asset to work on. You're often at a much more earlier stage in your career potentially. You're given a whole environment. So it's like, okay, we've got this location. Here's the concept. Here's the brief. We'd like you to work with the assets, set, dress, and create these whole environments. And as a result, Unreal Engine is such a massive tool. There's a lot of learning in that, and a lot of good development, I think, for artists. In terms of learning all the different aspects of Unreal. Yeah, it's different, whether it's necessarily the same or different in terms of the crunch. I don't know. There was another part to your question, wasn't there? Was that it? Yeah. Okay.
Well, I was wondering, do you have any thoughts on how we can reach 100% production? Maybe it's a long shot, but
100% virtual production, or 100% like reduction. I think 95% is pretty good. Like, I don't think there's ever going to be a world where it's completely, these numbers are all about comparing like just emissions data. These are before you even think about all the other tools that, in fact, a lot of other sustainability, consultants and people are talking about now that you should apply to your production anyway. I talked about energy usage being one of them. The very common thing that people do first of all is pay for carbon offset. You pay some money to offset the carbon of the shoot. But I've been on some panels with other sustainability experts, and their view is like, well, that's like the last thing you do. Like, you try and work your way through a whole long list of other things about your shoot, and then if you can't do anything else, then pay to sort of offset the rest. So I think that, if you can get to something like 75 or 95% reduction here, you've then got all those other tools, before you even have applied that, then potentially there is this, really significant change. There's another element to that, which is the rebound effect, which is another like term that people have started to come up with, which is, at the moment, I still find kind of quite hard to conceptualize, but the idea is that if it becomes so sort of easy, or such a reduction, then there'll be more productions and there'll be more people doing it, and so therefore it will kind of offset itself. I'm not seeing that right now in virtual production. I don't know how many people in this room work in that area, but it's certainly not at that level yet. I think that we're still in the early foothills of where virtual production goes as a method. But that has been said that the risk is that, if it did come to something like 100%, then does that mean more people would do it, and then therefore it wouldn't be so good? I don't know. I'm not quite sure I completely understand that logic, but yeah, there's definitely more that can be done beyond just the change between location shooting and potentially virtual production. Okay. Any more? No. Okay, I think we'll wrap it up there then. Thanks everyone, thanks for having me, and hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.